Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, and I have a really fun tutorial for you today. We all know as quilters, makers, the log cabin block is one of the most classic blocks of quilting that was created long before any of us were here. Well, as time has passed, Creative Grid actually came up with some tools to help people make more accurate log cabin blocks. You might have seen me film the 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo. It's an amazing tool. Well, when I wanted to create a Christmas wreath for a wall hanging, as you're seeing here, that's designed right here at Shabby, I tried that tool, but the blocks looked a little bit boxy and I was looking for some more curvature. So I started digging into kind of what does Creative Grid have that might help my block have the illusion of a curve, but that lovely, amazing, oversized and trim up function that we all love from Creative Grid, so that we don't have to piece everything so perfectly on our own. We get to oversize and square up and add on and oversize and square up. What did I find but this skinny 10-inch curvy log cabin trim tool? And so that's what we'll be talking about today. You can see what it creates is this illusion of this curve. There are no curves in this wall hanging at all. These are all just rectangles sewn onto, kind of starting in the center. We'll be unpacking that today. So this is a really fun tutorial to just show you some of the coolest features about this tool. So grab a snack, something to drink. I'll try to move right through it. We'll skip the sewing. We all know how to do the 1/4 inch. It's more of a study of how do we use this tool. So when you pick up your kit or pick up the tool or both, you're very confident moving into your project, very comfortable with the tool. And of course, it always works great with a spinning mat, which you'll soon see. So let's just dive right into the instructions for the skinny 10-inch curvy log cabin trim tool, because right away we have some choices to make. And for this specific project, I'm going to drive you right down the lane for what we did to create that look right there. And that is the log cabin Christmas wreath. As I mentioned, it's really nice size. The kit includes everything that you're seeing, even this amazing bow. I'll show you a cool trick at the end. I did not hand tie that bow, by the way, but I'm going to show you something that'll be inside your kit that's just fun to do. But let's start off first with making our blocks. This is where we're going to end up going. And notice how the blocks on this side are skinny and the blocks on this side are not the skinny. They're the wider blocks. So we'll be talking about the narrower blocks and the wider blocks. That's what's giving this illusion of the curve, because normally in a log cabin block, besides the center square, all of the widths of the strips are cut to the same width, different lengths, but they're all cut to the same width, and that's what's different here. So straight away, when you open up your instructions from Creative Grid, there's something I want to call your attention to. So if you pick up your kit and you grab your tool, which is needed, this is a required item to make the wall hanging here. Right away, you're given some options. The skinny 10-inch curvy log cabin with the wide logs added first. We highlighted that in yellow, and that's you if you're going to be joining us for this particular project. If you're just going to be picking up the tool and using this at home with your stash and maybe designing your own project, you also have the option of narrow logs added first, and then you could also do the courthouse steps. For today's tutorial, because it's obviously to be able to make the blocks behind us, so we'll be doing the wide logs added first. Everything we're seeing highlighted here in yellow. Now there are a lot of different cuts here. We've also included those in your instructions. So when I see that amount of cutting, the first thing I'm doing is grabbing some sizing my fabric, pressing that, and I want to get some nice clean cuts. So that's something you're going to be doing quite a bit of cutting. You might even want to add some labeling, because you can see these cuts are just different by only an inch, okay, on all of these as we progress through that. That's up to you if you want to label those. That's just some tips and techniques. Now, after you get everything cut out, on the back side here are your assembly instructions. So we'll be flipping over to that. But it's an easy concept. So we're starting off first with our center square, And notice this is not a square, it's a rectangle. Right away, we're sewing that right side together and we'll be pressing away from our center. Once that's accomplished, just pretending that's sewn together, we're sewing on the other wide log. Remember that we have the instructions of sewing on the wide logs first. This is a wide log, this is a wide log. Pressing away from the center, followed by our skinny and our skinny until we have our unit will look like this. This is our round one, okay? So let me just flip that over so you can see we always pressed away from the center, right? Wide, wide, skinny, skinny. So right away, we began to grab for our tool. And I want to point out that per our instructions, and it mentions that in here, that notice here, we have our square and our first rectangle, wide, wide, skinny, skinny. Make sure you are in this orientation before you begin to trim. That is very important because recognizing this is a square. I could turn this any way right now and probably make this trim, but it wouldn't be the correct trim function. So notice how this says narrow round one, and on the opposite side, we have wider round one. Since we're seeing the narrow in our upper right quadrant, we definitely want the narrow round one up. See how that's framing that center square right there? And look at the dashed line is running right along our seam allowance and right along this vertical seam allowance, exposing the right side and the top. And you'll soon see why this works so beautifully, really with a spinning mat. It helps you stay organized. Give it one more rotation, and I'm going to drop down into that spot, round one. That's hard to say. So you can see I'm framing my center square. Notice the dash line is running right up my seam allowance. And this is what you should get used to seeing, about that much that you're going to be trimming off, okay? As we progress through this, this is right now very obvious where to put the tool. But as we progress through various rounds, you might have like, is this the right spot? If you keep in mind you're always going to be trimming off about that much, you're going to be in the right spot. So let's go ahead and trim and trim. And so now, looking at our block here, see, this is where we are right now. Keep putting that block so that your center is here, green is here, and your skinny is in that upper right quadrant. Once we do that, remember how the wider blocks are going on first. This could fit on any side. Of course, we'll be right side together, so we're 1/4 inch pressing away. So the wider logs are coming on first, followed by our skinny, pressing away from the center until we have our round two, and then we will go ahead and trim. So let's look at that. Once again, narrow is in the upper right, the wider logs are in the lower left. So as you would expect, narrow round two. So where should we be? Notice that's kind of my go-to every single time as my initial placement, but then I'm also making kind of fine-tuning. My dash line's going up my seam, dash line's going across the seam. Trim, trim, and you guess it, we're going to turn, drop that down as I frame that square again. Notice it's about the same amount I'm trimming. Lining this up, framing that block. And we trim, and we trim. And let's make sure that we continue to rotate back up so that the skinny is over on this side and the wider is over on this. If you stay organized, you're not going to do this wrong. It's when we don't stay organized that we could potentially add things to the wrong side. So what's next? On the bottom, wider logs first, right? Skinny next, pressing away from the center. You get the idea. So let's just keep looking at our tool, making sure that you're comfortable with the alignment. I want to take you all the way through all of the rounds, not drop off at any point, so that you can always go back to this video if you ever get confused and make sure that you're trimming in the right spot before you make that first cut. So of course we have our narrow 1, 2, and 3. Let's frame that. Now look at, as we've added more logs, look how we have the additional lineup, just to help you know you're in the absolute right spot. Amazing. And we'll drop that 3. And I have this framed, dash line going vertically, dash line going horizontally, trim, trim. And I always like to bring that so that it puts the block in the proper position for adding the next round. So that's one other reason I love that spinning mat, to help me get that turned back to the right position so I don't inadvertently add a log to the wrong side. I have absolutely done that before. Okay. Once that's added on, pressed away from the center, let's do our round 4. And we have our round, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 right there. Okay. Look at all the dash lines lining up with all of these seams. Incredible tool. I did not know the power of creative grid tools till I would say maybe 10 years ago. And I continue to be more and more amazed with them every day with really what they do. They help, especially someone that has struggled with accurate piecing or a beginner. This is beginner friendly. And if you would have told me that as a beginner quilter when none of this existed, this could not have been a beginner project because everything had to be pieced just perfectly. None of this existed. All right, wide round 4. I'm going to drop back down into this pocket. Right here, it's got the white lines, probably hard to see from above. And I'm just fine-tuning it as I'm running up these lines. Running up those seams, I should say. Incredible. And for our final round, of course, we have our green going on the bottom. This is Yuletide Traditions, by the way, from Northcott. When I saw this, I knew I wanted to make a wreath quilt. I just knew it. And that's when kind of that discovery happened. As I said, I started off with a regular 10-inch log cabin trim tool, and it was just a little too boxy. And thinking, there's not a ruler out there. And sure enough, the skinny Curvy, I was like, their tools truly solve problems, right? Sew this on, press to the outside, and then for the final trimming of our block, super fun, you'll be able to trim around the entire block. So right here is our round 5. And if you just kind of keep that same rhythm of remembering you're going to be trimming about the same amount, right? Could this fit down here? Yes, but of course that's not correct. We're always going to be starting in that same square, that same home base, fine tuning. And then we get to trim around all sides. How fun is that? All made possible with the brilliance of this tool. And we have our block perfectly ready to be joined up with other blocks that are green and white. Some are just green and green. Stay really organized on that one. Here it's a little bit easier, right? You've got the white blocks are the skinny. All of my wider blocks are green. And these here, you have some of both. That's where the labeling might really, really come in handy. Of course, we're going to be making all of those easy in the center. Just snowball those corners. That'll be all included in your pattern. And of course, you're going to be sewing that all together, adding your outer borders and your binding. But I have to show you how to make this bow. It's so cool. When we were talking about the bow, we were actually debating, do we give them ribbon? Some people have difficulty with a bow. We want the bow to be able to be removed. So if somebody needed to wash their project or wanted to, they'd be able to do that. So if you are going to be picking up your kit, you're going to be actually getting this in your kit. It is the coolest thing. You might have seen these, or maybe you haven't. It's called a pull. It's kind of pull bow. So you're just going to open this up and you have these two strings that you pull that make the most beautiful bow anyone has absolutely ever seen. I think it's the coolest thing. Simply tie that off and now you can just use needle and thread. You could use a safety pin, however you want to be able to. Of course, you're going to be trimming these away. Now you could, if you desired, fish these through the actual quilt and tie it to the back if you wanted that. Or like I said, maybe a safety pin to attach that, needle and thread from the back to attach that, however you want to do that. I know that's not part of our tutorial about the creative grid, but I just couldn't resist showing you really how fun that is. So as you can see, a block that looks extremely complex is made easy peasy with this Creative Grid skinny 10-inch curvy log cabin trim tool from Creative Grid. Head over to the website right now to grab your kit. Limited as always. Be sure to grab this amazing tool, the spinning mat, and any notions you might need.